Hey everyone, it's Jody from This Day, also joined by some other familiar voices.
Hi, it's Niki.
Hey there, it's Kellie.
As listeners have hopefully heard by now, we are halfway through our fall fundraiser for Radiotopia, which is our network of independent podcasts.
And look, one of the things that we love about doing the fundraiser is hearing from people as they support Radiotopia and finding out why you are supporting us. I mean, it means so much when we hear from you. There's actually this Slack channel where when donations and comments come in, we can see it, and I just love seeing it roll by. It's not just an ego boost to see people say nice things about us, but it's also like a real reminder of what we're in it for.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Like this comment from Chadwick, he says, I love the This Day podcast. Fantastic, educational, and fun. Oh, thank you, Chadwick.
Now, is that it? Fantastic, educational, and fun? Is that basically the only three things that matter? And is that the order? Is that the right order?
I think it's the right order. Well, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna second guess Chadwick. I also love this one from Jared because it gets at, like, why give? This is what he wrote. What got me to donate was the idea of donating to many of my favorite podcasts, and that I might be contributing to a show that doesn't even exist yet, that might become one of my favorites. Keep up the good work.
Love that.
That's very nice. Yeah, and that's true. You are investing in Radiotopia as a whole. I will also say that Jared, who wrote that in, he wrote favorite twice with a U in there, which makes me think that he's writing from overseas. So shout out to all the overseas listeners and members of Radiotopia. But look, as Jared pointed out, donating is a vote of confidence in a business model and an ethos of collective independent creators, which, as I think you know, listeners, is very, very rare and in short supply these days.
And as of this recording, we are about halfway to our goal of 1,500 donors before December 31st. So if this day has meant something to you this year, please make your tax-deductible donation today, right on our website at thisdaypod.com. Your donation is split among all the creators in this network, so everyone really gets to benefit.
Yeah, and every gift helps get us closer to our goal. So visit us at thisdaypod.com, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, folks, we are reaching the end of the year, which means that if you are anything like me, you might be letting the spending go a little bit. Between holiday shopping and travel and parties and end-of-year donations, it can be easy to lose track of how much you're spending, what you're spending it on, and the overall state of your financial picture. Well, if you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch. Rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025, Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean interface on your laptop or your phone. I've been using Monarch for a few months now, and for the first time in maybe ever, I feel like I have a real sense of how the money in my life is flowing, which, as I head into a new year, is going to really help me make some smart choices. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code THISDAY at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code THISDAY. Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, December 1st, 1952, the New York Daily News publishes a story with the headline, XGI becomes Blonde Beauty. The subheadline said, Operations Transform Bronx Youth, and the article goes on to read, I'm going to quote most of the article here, George W. Jorgensen Jr., son of a Bronx carpenter, served in the Army for 2 years and was given honorable discharge in 1951. Now, George is no more. After 6 operations, Jorgensen's sex has been changed, and today she is a striking woman working as a photographer in Denmark. Parents were informed of the big change in a letter Christine, that's her new name, sent to them recently. So let's talk about Christine Jorgensen, in many ways the first transgender celebrity, and then someone who would go on to talk a lot about transgender rights and do a lot of important advocacy. And when I say celebrity, I'm not joking. In fact, in 1953, the Associated Press reported that Jorgensen was the individual who had the most news articles published about them in that year. And this was the year of John Wayne and Marilyn Monroe and Bing Crosby. But no, everyone was talking about Christine Jorgensen. And we're going to talk about Christine Jorgensen as well. Here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Well, let's get to know Christine Jorgensen. Let's do maybe just a little background, and then we'll talk about the sex change and go from there.
Okay, so Christine Jorgensen is born in 1926 in New York City. She's assigned male at birth. Her parents give her the name of George, and they live sort of a middle-class life in the Bronx. I mean, her family, sends her to public school. She goes to summer camps. They have family vacations. Very kind of regular, but she's known as being like somewhat frail, blonde, introverted boy who always sort of avoided fistfights and rough and tumble games. Very early on, she always expressed feelings of discomfort with her body throughout childhood and was not really interested in anything that was like strictly designated for boys. And actually held a lot of resentment for her sisters who could kind of openly express their femininity. And I think her parents noticed this too as well. And so, it's kind of shocking to see that how she gets older, especially given the time in which she is making this transition. She has a lot of family support. Like her family understood that she was always different, is what they would say. And yeah, she joins the army when she graduates high school at 19. She gets rejected twice for being too small, but eventually she makes her way to the army and serves honorably.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a fascinating story in a lot of ways. One, like the level of acceptance that her family seemed to have for her at a time when like being different in any way in sexuality and gender expression was going to run up against some pretty strict norms in the 1940s and then again in the 1950s. But also the language she uses to describe her experience of being trapped in a boy's body, of feeling lost between two sexes. I mean, it is the same kind of language that even in an era where we have just many more stories and experiences from people who are openly trans, that she's using the same language is interesting, right? She's describing what would become a much more commonly shared experience.
You mentioned language. I was going to save this for later, but I wanted to read that full Daily News article in the opening, in part because like shout out to whoever the Daily News editor was in 1952, because we still struggle with some of this language today. And here's this editor just basically saying, after 6 operations, Jorgensen's sex has been changed, and today she is a striking woman. And it's just like, here, meet Christine, the pronoun shifts. I mean, it's just like, And I think that's a big part of this story is just, obviously there's the societal level, but like at the individual level of just like this person and how people treated this person, how people were empathetic to this person. I agree with you, Niki. It is kind of striking how much people just kind of saw it for what it was.
Particularly her family, because I feel like, that seems to be always the biggest hurdle, getting acceptance from your parents, and they seem to be very supportive.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and we'll talk about her transformation, but also, we've done episodes in the past on the lavender scare and how politicized sexuality becomes in exactly this period that Jorgensen is becoming a national celebrity. So we'll circle back to that. But we should talk about her transformation because it's pretty unusual in this period to undergo gender affirming care. It's not something that a lot of people do. It's not something that a lot of people know about. But in 1948, she reads The Male Hormone, which is a book by Paul de Kruif. The subtitle, A New Gleam of Hope for Prolonging Man's Prime of Life. And basically it's looking at testosterone and talking about what testosterone does to the human body. So she reads this, and she says in her autobiography that this is the first time she really connects her struggles with her identity, her sexual frustrations, to her hormones, that there's something about her hormones that she feels is a mismatch between how she feels and what she looks like. And so this influences her to have hormone therapy so that her body will reflect her gender identity. So in 1949, she begins a gender transition. She starts with hormone medication. She takes a synthetic form of estrogen. This is basically what we know now as hormone replacement therapy or gender affirming therapy. And she says in her autobiography that when she began shifting over to estrogen, that her feelings of depression started to go away, her productivity increased, and then she receives in 1950-51 in Copenhagen gender affirming surgery. And by the end of this, she talks about how she felt more accepted and more confident and livelier. She feels comfortable enough to pursue her career in photography. She picks the name Christine after her doctor who did her surgeries. There really is this sense, and it's hard to know how much this is constructed once she becomes a celebrity, but there really is this sense that there was just this easy process to have this gender-affirming care, and it just made her life better.
And I think as somebody who lived most of her childhood as introverted and quiet and sort of like shrinking herself a little bit, to be able to have a life where you can live it to the fullest, where you can thrive, where you can sort of be much more in your own personality, I think is really exciting.
Before we get back to where we started and, her coming back to the United States and becoming a celebrity, there are two things worth noting here. I mean, one is I tried to get a sense of kind of like the state of the medical science at the time and why she had to go to Denmark to get this procedure. But even in Denmark, I think it was like fairly new. I mean, this is like a real trailblazing moment. I also went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on this book that she read, The Male Hormone, A New Gleam of Hope for Prolonging Man's Prime of Life by Paul de Kroof, who was a German-American scientist, microbiologist. And he did not write this book with the idea that it would, give people
not at all.
The notion that they could change, that gender was a fluid thing. I mean, the jacket flap to this book says, in a thrilling scientific detective story, Paul de Kroof tells the story of the male hormone's rise from its original sexual disreputability to its present promise of lifting the total vitality of mankind. The male hormone discloses magic far beyond the merely sexual. It boosts muscle power, it banishes mental fatigue, it eases heart pain, and basically slips into like a supplements ad on your local bro podcast.
It is 1,000 times percent a supplements ad. Right? And the same claims that are made about testosterone today, now that it has become much more normalized as something that men take, Jody, as a supplement.
Yeah, a vitamin.
And this, of course, gets at something that I think about a lot in our current sort of roiling debate or bad faith arguments around all of these issues. But it's like straight bro-y men seem to be more obsessed with hormones than almost anyone these days,
Yes.
And they like freak out about hormone replacement therapy while at the same time popping all sorts of supplements, to get their testosterone up. So,
Well, listen, I mean, we're all middle-aged, can I say that? But as
wow. This early in the morning.
Okay, that's it for the show.
I'm just saying, as we age, like your hormones do change and shift. You lose a little bit of that testosterone or the estrogen that you need, especially if you're perimenopausal or whatever, like all those things. I think hormone therapy writ large is something that, regardless of your sexual orientation, people are dabbling with much more, because those abrupt shift in your age and body is jarring, to say the least.
Well, and to your identity too, right? Like if when your hormones change, the things that you associate with being a woman or being a man start to change as well. And it can lead to a kind of crisis where it's about aging, but it's also about your relationship to your gender and your sexuality. And I think we have much more of an understanding of that today. But it is fascinating, Jody, when you were reading that copy, like this is presented as kind of cutting edge these days in terms of like men using testosterone, right? That it's not just about sex, that it's about your brain and your energy and all of these different things. I find it fascinating that was the conversation they were having in the 50s.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Matt from the Explorers Podcast. I want to invite you to join me on the voyages and journeys of the most famous explorers in the history of the world. These are the thrilling and captivating stories of Magellan, Shackleton, Lewis and Clark, and so many other famous and not so famous adventurers from throughout history. Go to explorerspodcast.com or just look us up on your podcast app. That's the Explorers Podcast.
All right, folks, I think we might be starting to get into holiday gift-giving panic mode. The calendar is ticking by, you're staring at that list and can't think of what to get people. Well, I've got a tip for you. When it comes to holiday gifts, I always turn to beautiful, timeless pieces of clothing and accessories that I know the person I'm giving it to will wear for years. And that is why I've been turning to Quince. I picked up a Mongolian cashmere sweater there for my sister. I mean, who doesn't love a nice new sweater? Over in the accessories section, I grabbed a really classy leather travel pouch set for a friend of mine, $60. Please don't tell them, by the way. It's a surprise. And of course, as I'm cruising around, I can't help but pick up a new pair of wool pants for myself. The items are incredible. They're luxury. They're affordable. Find gifts so good that you will want to keep them with Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. So we are starting to get into the thick of the holiday season, and while I love the holidays, I also know that it's a really tricky time to try and eat healthy. The sweets, the baked goods, the holiday parties, the family dinners. I have a theory that the window for bad eating actually goes from like Halloween through to the Super Bowl or maybe even Valentine's Day. It can just be a really tough stretch. Which is why, when I have a chance to actually cook at home for myself and my family, I really want something healthy, seasonal, full of vegetables and great flavors. And HelloFresh does the trick. They are the #1 meal kit in America, making home cooking easier with chef-crafted recipes and fresh ingredients delivered straight to your door. And they've recently taken things to the next level, doubling their menu, packing it with healthy, high-protein recipes from all over the globe. If you cook at home with HelloFresh, you just might forget that you ate all that junk at those last 5 holiday parties. The best way to cook just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/thisday10FM now to get 10 free meals and a free item for life. 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on the first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. Once again, that's HelloFresh.com/thisday10FM to get 10 free meals and a free item for life. Okay, now back to this headline. XGI becomes Blonde Beauty, cover of the New York Daily News in December of 1952. This is when Jorgensen is now coming back to the United States and starting to get a little bit of press. And I would say, so far, I think the story has been surprisingly one of someone who feels relatively seen and affirmed and finds treatment that seems to really help her. Once the glare of the press is on her story, I would say it kind of pushes in a lot of different directions. That initial New York Daily News article, I would say largely laudatory or celebratory, maybe a little bit of like a curious sort of bent there, but nevertheless pretty like just kind of affirming. One sort of darker element to this, though, is by all accounts, Jorgensen did not want the spotlight. She apparently didn't even know how the American press came to learn of her transition and thinks that it may have been that a family member leaked her private letters to the press. So,
so much support for family.
Exactly. But there it is, the 1952 version of doxing or whatever you want to call it. But yeah.
Yeah, and one of those letters that allegedly got leaked was one that she wrote in which she said, quote, "Nature has made a mistake which I have corrected, and now I am your daughter." And this is the moment where she's sort of announcing to her family about her transition.
Yeah, I mean, I think that forces her hand in some ways. Like, she has to deal with the press. When she lands back in the United States, she's on a flight with the Danish royal family, and there's all this press outside, and they don't care about the king and queen of Denmark. They care about this American celebrity who's just landed. And Kellie, you mentioned, how private and introverted she had been. Part of it may be her hand being forced. Part of it may be that she finally felt like her true, authentic self. But she becomes an instant celebrity. Police have to escort her out of the airport to keep the crowds under control. And while she's pretty hesitant about it at first, like she wants the crowds to go away at first, she does eventually embrace this idea that she is this new celebrity.
I'm just, again, shocked that like 75 years ago, the response to her could be so positive and overwhelming. I mean, my fear, if I were to just hear this story sort of like casually, like, oh my gosh, was she in danger? That is the first sort of thing that I would think. But to think that she becomes this celebrity that people are in awe of and people want to see, even if some of that is a little tainted, you know what I mean? I think it's still a moment in which I don't think I could have conceived of happening in the 1950s at all. Her sort of walking off as a celebrity, and not necessarily infamous, but more intrigue than infamy, is something that is just kind of wild.
I think it speaks to a number of things, and one of those things being there isn't a concerted anti-trans movement at this time. And so for people who are just encountering a trans person for the first time, they seem quite receptive, right? It's not to suggest that she didn't face any sort of discrimination. We'll talk about some of the discrimination she faced, but that people were curious. They were like, okay, okay, we use a different name now. We use different pronouns now. It shows that it's not actually that hard to use different pronouns. Today it's treated like one of the most difficult mental activities that a person faces. And it turns out it's actually super easy to do. And it's treated as a kind of bravery in a way that there's not a ton of space for that anymore. I mean, in fact, when she wins the Woman of the Year award from the Scandinavian Societies of Greater New York, it doesn't look like there were like a big protest that were like, we must defend women, which there would be today.
Yeah. There's even an article in the Chicago Daily Tribune where they interviewed her family in 1952, and it says parents praise bravery. I mean, again, the fact that she has this support.
I just think in general, like we've been saying it, but people saw a real human being at the heart of the story, more so than anything, and that was, that's the key to all of this. That said, I mean, there were other twists and turns along the way. So one is, she becomes a celebrity, and no surprise, starts to maybe try and cash in on it a little bit. So she starts performing in nightclubs, and her quote is, "I decided that if they wanted to see me, they might as well have to pay for it." And she goes around town. She becomes a performer, an actor. She grosses over $70,000 in 1953. That's not nothing.
It's cash money.
Yep. She has a theme song that she comes out to called "I Enjoy Being a Girl." She wore a Wonder Woman costume at the end of her show, and then the Warner Studio demanded that she stop using that character a number of years later. But, she really kind of took up some of that, like, she enjoyed being glamorous and famous, and wore fur coats and glamorous jewelry and so forth. And maybe that's part of why she was easier to be accepted too, funnily enough, is the more she embraced those sort of stereotypical or traditional female tropes, maybe that made things a little easier. That is not to say that she had a completely easy path. And in particular, she runs up against a very hard and fast rule in the law, and when she tries to get a marriage license in 1959.
Yeah, I mean, her birth certificate still says that she is male. And so when she tries to get married, she's not able to modify the birth certificate, although some states already did allow, like California, you to modify the sex in your birth certificate, even in the 1950s. But she wasn't able
to. Wild.
Right? Just like this flexibility that's there from the start is a reminder that history doesn't move in just one direction. But she can't get her birth certificate changed. And so when she applies for a marriage license, she can't get it. And that ultimately ends up in leading to this broken engagement. Her fiance loses his job in D.C. when his engagement to Jorgensen becomes known, because again, Lavender Scare era, there's a lot of fear being drummed up that people who have different sexualities or different sexual identities are weak and vulnerable to becoming blackmailed by communists. And so there are these real ramifications. And there's a later interview that she does where she talks about, like, she's not married, even though she'd really like to be, because it's very difficult to date as a trans woman. And there's this barrier to her being able to be legally married in the United States.
And also, she pushes back on the idea that she can't somehow be married because she can't have kids. She's like, I'm no different than a woman who's had a hysterectomy. Like, people get married all the time. This is not about procreation. This is about, her relationship and her choice to get married.
Yeah. We've been focusing on the 50s and into the 60s here, but she remains, I'd say, in the spotlight, a well-known figure for a number of decades beyond that. In 1967, she writes an autobiography. It sells 500,000 copies. 1970, there's a feature film based on her life called The Christine Jorgensen Story. And there's this incident from 1970 when Vice President Spiro Agnew is trying to insult Charles Goodell, who's a representative from New York. And he calls Goodell the Christine Jorgensen of the Republican Party. Jorgensen demands an apology from Spiro Agnew. He refuses to issue an apology. I mean, I think I see two things there. One is, obviously, there's just kind of like, we see how just calling someone transgender is a slur in and of itself. You don't even need to kind of like, there's no like metaphor there or no.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, you lodge that and it's just serves as an insult on its own. But also just the fact that in 1970, she was still a kind of notable enough name that the vice president could use that as an insult, and is, kind of remarkable in a way, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
There's also this kind of longer tradition, sorry to take us down this particular path, but like he's calling Goodell a Christine Jorgensen because he's a Democrat pretending they see him as a Republican who's actually a Democrat inside, right? So like this idea that he's like a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing, or just pretending to be something that he's not. There is this tradition, I mean, even back into the late 18th century in the United States, of calling people a political hermaphrodite when they don't have like a clear political identity, or where they're seen as like being dishonest about where they stand politically. And so you could kind of see, I mean, I think we don't want to paint too rosy of a picture of like Jorgensen was just accepted, right? That there is this longer suspicion around different sexualities, different gender identities that comes up in American politics in this interesting way that Agnew sort of revives with her.
But it seems to me that like initially, while she has some support and intrigue, it's interesting how as time goes by, it becomes more and more suspicious and more adversarial as she goes along. It's not as though she opens up doors and it makes it even more easier for others to sort of walk through. It's like she's still navigating this life, and it's becoming more and more difficult, I think, to do that, especially as you get through the 70s and the 80s.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's in part because she is part, increasingly, of a political movement that has real sort of mass energy, right? 69 is the Stonewall riot. You have this big push for gay rights in the United States in the late 1960s and 1970s. And when it's one person, it's a curiosity. It's
I was
not a
just
threat,
going to say that.
right?
I
When
was
it's
just
a
going to say that.
movement.
When it's one, it's fine. When it's two, it's a problem.
Yep.
Yeah, or when people recognize that there's a sort of cultural and political wedge to drive here. And I mean,
Right.
We see this. It's funny, we see, this happened, I think, for Christine Jorgensen over the course of decades. I feel like it happens now over the course of months for people. But you see this happen all the time, where all of a sudden you see an individual just get taken up by a social political machine, and in a bunch of different directions, whether the victims of it or they're taking advantage of it. But, I think that's the huge story here, is just as this individual person's humanity recedes or gets erased, all of these other things intervene. And that's definitely part of the story for her. She is part of, activism throughout the 70s and into the 80s. She's interviewed from time to time as a trailblazer. She dies in 1989 of bladder and lung cancer. And I want to end by reading a quote in that was circulated, that appeared in a lot of her obits from towards the end of her life as she was reflecting on her life. And she said, "What people still don't understand is that the important thing is identity. You don't transition primarily for sexual reasons. You do it because of who you are." And I still think we need that reminder today. And I think her story that we just told is a reminder of that, this all started with her thinking about her identity as a child, and her parents recognizing that their child was struggling and thinking about their identity in new ways. That is really the heart of all of this. And I think that's where her story really shows us.
I will say, I mean, when you look back on her life, she does write her own autobiography. It sells almost 450,000 copies. That's a bestseller by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I think people are really intrigued with her story. But after she dies, she really becomes a part of the legacy of the LGBTQ community. There is a legacy walk that's on public display in Chicago that celebrates LGBTQ history and people. And she gets inducted as a member and has this bronze memorial of her. And she's also added to the National LGBT LGBTQ wall in New York City to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots.
Yeah, she's very much become sort of a key figure in trans history and LGBTQ history in the U.S.
I got to say, one of the sources for our episode today was an article on the National World War II Museum, which is in New Orleans, which if people haven't been to, is really fantastic.
It's a great museum.
And there's a long article there called "From G.I. Joe to G.I. Jane: Christine Jorgensen's Story," and it's a look, I think, mostly through a military lens of Christine Jorgensen's story. And I got to say, my first thought upon stumbling across that article was like, why was this was not on the list of kind of quote unquote woke history that the Trump administration was going after. I hate to say it, but I was sort of a little surprised that this article still existed on the World War II Museum's website. But
for now,
yeah, this history continues to be contested or actively erased for sure. But not on this show. Okay, that's the story of Christine Jorgensen. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network of independent, artist-produced podcasts. Don't forget to sign up for our America 250 Watch newsletter. Every Thursday, members get exclusive access to analysis and information about the upcoming semi-quincentennial, commentary from our team, and a list of fascinating things that happened that week throughout history. Join in, find out lots more at thisdaypod.com. You can also follow This Day Pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Jacob Feldman is our researcher. Brittany Brown is our editor. My name is Jody Abergan. See you soon.
Radiotopia.